Good morning. I'm Jim Csek with KelownaNow, and I have with me Iain Burns, our managing editor. And we're doing our morning need to know. And the big news, Iain, this morning, obviously, big victory in the United States for Donald J. Trump, winning the Senate as well. I think the House is still up for. They still haven't finalized that.
They seem quite confident, don't they, about the House? I haven't checked in the last sort of few minutes, but yeah, they seem to think they've won that too.
Yeah, Mike Johnson seems to think that that's going to go their way as well. But big victory in the United States. Kamala still, we're waiting for her to concede, but most networks have called it now for Trump.
Yeah, very unexpected that it should conclude so rapidly. I mean, everybody was expecting to get into a bunker and wait for days, possibly weeks. But I mean, as our Prime Minister has just said in the last hour, it was a decisive victory, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's what you would call a landslide victory with the Electoral College. That big blue wall or whatever that they expected to hold up, basically the whole wall fell.
Yeah, I mean, quite interesting that Wisconsin, that was considered, of all of the swing states, I think that was considered the one that she was going to do best in. And that's been called already for Trump. I don't know. I'm not sure I'd call it a landslide. We'll have to wait and see on that. But
well, I mean,
it's a decisive one.
There's a lot of people calling it a landslide. But then he also won the popular vote, which is unusual.
Yeah, the first Republican to do that since George Bush in 2004 when he was against John Kerry.
And they're calling it one of the biggest comebacks ever for a president that lost in his second running, and then to come back and win again in your third try at it, and decisively win.
It's not happened. It's not happened recently, has it?
I think 18 something they were talking about.
Grover Cleveland, I think, did it a long time ago. That's more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, a decisive win at that, though. Like I said, a very decisive win. And then there's a lot of people talking about that it all came down to Pennsylvania. Elon Musk was one of those guys, but it clearly showed that Pennsylvania was really one of the keys in this election.
Yeah, and if you were watching the coverage, any of the coverage yesterday, the very decisive role played by men. As we've mentioned that a few times, haven't we, in our conversations about this? It was men v women almost. And men apparently were very, very strongly motivated to come out. And that seems, at this early point, to have been the deciding factor.
And then lots of pickups almost across the board for Trump there, with Latinos, with the black vote, with almost every demographic he's picking up in. And then I think I watched some of this commentary from MSNBC, saying that that really that he attacked the issues that were most relevant for people, and that was the economy being one of the biggest ones, right? And then the border.
Yeah, well, Kamala did concentrate a little bit on affordability, didn't she? I remember one of her first major announcements was about trying to control the price of food, basically. Or she was talking about food prices. That was one of her big policies. But I feel like Trump has built his whole political career on that, hasn't he? On affordability, and then also the border, which I haven't heard many people mention in the aftermath. But I think that played quite a big role as well. I think immigration was huge in the U.S. this cycle.
Justin Trudeau came out and congratulated him. It'll be interesting to see, after all the rhetoric that the Liberal Party has said against Donald Trump, how that relationship goes. I know there was a poll recently out saying that they would prefer Pierre Poilievre. Canadians would prefer Pierre Poilievre if we had a Donald Trump presidency.
Yeah, I think they've all been out this morning. Chrystia Freeland, Mark Holland, who's the health minister, I think perhaps unwisely, decided to discuss abortion and how important that is to Canada, and spoke about setbacks, almost refer Trump's victory, which probably isn't going to do this government any favors when the conversations begin between the two governments. But yeah, I mean, they're in a very awkward position, aren't they? Because we're all well aware of Justin Trudeau's opinions of Donald Trump and everything that represents. I mean, he quite obviously doesn't like him. He doesn't like his politics, and it's going to be very interesting, I think, the coming months.
I think one of the more interesting things that I'm going to watch for is of all these people that says that or that said that Donald Trump was a threat to democracy and all this stuff. Like, will they respect democracy? Because the American people didn't just like, it wasn't a sliver. This is a resounding vote for Donald Trump. Will they respect the democratic vote of the American people?
Well, I think a lot of that's going to depend on what we hear from Joe Biden today, I assume, unless he's gonna let Kamala have the whole day's news cycle. But it depends on what he says, and it depends on what Kamala says. If they come out and agree to this, then you would expect that will be settled. But we'll wait and see, because it isn't. The stereotype is that it's just Trump that denies election outcomes, but obviously we had Hillary Clinton did that too, didn't she, in 2016, and cast doubt over it. So fingers crossed that it's a calm one.
I understand she's not speaking until 6 p.m. tonight. I don't know. Have you heard differently?
I haven't even heard that, but they seem to have a very tight lid on their operation, don't they? The Team Kamala. So I suppose we won't find out until she's there on stage.
He's made some big promises, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We've seen the stock market react very positively to his election, and we've also seen that in the commodity markets. Commodities down mostly because the U.S. dollar up strongly. So I mean, it's definitely saying that the U.S. dollar, strong U.S. dollar favors, or Trump is definitely affecting the U.S. dollar.
Well, I've heard one explanation for that being that there's an assumption that his tax cuts will bring back inflation and thereby force the Federal Reserve to slow down on its interest rate cuts. But I'm not entirely sure why. I think people have a lot of confidence in Donald Trump when it comes to the economy, because the same thing happened last time, didn't it? He was rising very high on Dow Jones particularly, and I think it's just the same thing again. I think he's deemed to be business friendly, isn't he?
And one of his big promises, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. He's promised to end those 2 wars even before he takes office. So, the clock's now ticking on those 2 promises.
Yeah, and the border. The border and those wars he's going to be judged by those. And, he's promised all these deportations as well. That's another thing that he's going to be held to account on. But I really struggle to understand how he's going to end the Ukraine war with a click of his finger. I mean, one of his old chums there, Kim Jong-un, has sent soldiers into Ukraine. Maybe he can use him as a third party or something. I don't know. But
I mean, I've heard it out there that one of the things that scares people, Donald Trump, that he's a bully, and that and now he has the big stick of the U.S. military. So maybe in that way, the policeman of the world steps up, and it does scare some of these people into ending these conflicts.
Perhaps, yeah. But I just wonder. I wonder if the Russians have any fear left of the Americans, because the Americans are basically all in on Ukraine now, aren't they, under the Biden presidency? So maybe it would be more of maybe adopt a more conciliatory approach, and that might work. No idea what his plan is.
We shall see. Now let's shift our focus back to home. An Okanagan ER shuts down for the 38th time. This one is definitely winning the race. It's tragic, actually. So 38 times this year for Oliver. And then the other ones are, up there, 200 Mile House, Nicola Valley. There's just so many of them. Lillooet, that continue to see these closures.
And this was also, this had the worst record last year as well. So not only has it not improved, but it's got worse. And that's, more than 10% of the days of the year. Yeah. So there's a 1 in 10 chance, basically, if you live in this area, a 1 in 10 chance that if you have a serious accident or something like that you're not going to be able to get emergency care. I mean, it's greater than 1 in 10, isn't it? But
so
quite terrible.
You've reached out to Interior Health to get the numbers for all these closures, and they've told you to?
They've told me that they're awaiting the installation of a new government, which is something that they're reluctant to.
Wouldn't they
they're
have
reluctant to do anything, really, aren't they? The whole bureaucracy kind of goes into dormancy during the election period.
Wouldn't they have that information right next to them? Like they should have a running tally. I know we can do it ourselves, so we just thought we would get it from them.
Yeah, you would expect that, wouldn't you? But I mean, they have their system, I suppose. They have their rules, but it is a little bit frustrating, especially when this happens almost every other day, doesn't it? It's such a huge issue. It is a bit of a disappointment.
And we've asked Adrian Dix for an interview so many times. I guess we'll just continue to ask.
Yeah, and we'll kind of feed off the scraps that he gives us when he does the odd press conference and makes the odd appearance. But yeah, it's an ideal in terms of communications, but who knows?
And then the move to Canada, that Google spiked. Like everybody's searching to move to Canada because they're all trying to get away from the election of Donald J. Trump. I don't know, like there's been quite a few Canada should get a whole bunch of movie stars, according to what all these people that are going to move to Canada are fearing for their lives.
Maybe we'll get Oprah. She'll bring her billions of dollars over.
I think we can get Taylor Swift, and we can get quite a few of these people.
I mean, I'm sure there's there's a monograph out there somewhere that studies this phenomenon, because it's been happening now for so long, hasn't it? I'm interested to know when it all began. I suppose you could say it began with the creation of America, didn't it? When the Loyalists came over, they were the first ones that said, I'm going to move to Canada. They actually did though. Yeah. But a particularly common refrain during the Bush era, wasn't it? I don't know if you can remember that. Constantly, in that 2004 election, there were many people that said they were going to come move to Canada, and not very many did.
I think I
suspect it'll be the same.
The one that worries me is all like that mass deportation they're saying they're going to do. That those people might be moving to Canada just to get away from the deportation.
Oh yeah, that's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it, that one? And I think it was Renee Merrifield when you spoke to her the other day. She mentioned that as well, didn't she? Yeah. As potential trouble on the horizon.
Yeah, for sure. In your 5 things this morning, definitely U.S. stocks, the dollar, Bitcoin, big surge, all-time high with Bitcoin. Donald Trump said that he will make Bitcoin part of reserve assets, so that would be a really big deal for Bitcoin. Bitcoin breaking $75,000 US, huge day. And like I said, and the stock market too. We'll get into that a little bit later, but the cryptocurrency market, well before anybody called anything, and the betting markets had called the win for Donald Trump hours before it looked like he was going to win. But the betting markets flipped almost to 95% or something very early on.
Yeah, they seem to. I mean, in general, it seems to me with politics that the betting markets are more accurate than the pollsters.
So they were talking about. Yeah, keep going.
I just don't quite understand. You'll have to explain it to me since you know more about crypto. I don't quite understand why it is that both the dollar and crypto and Bitcoin surge, because I would think of those. They're generally cast as rivals, aren't they? The idea that traditional currency and crypto.
So in this case, Donald Trump has said that he will make Bitcoin part of reserve assets, just as gold is a reserve asset and the US dollar is a reserve asset. So if countries start making Bitcoin as a reserve asset, and it's such a small asset, it would drive the price of Bitcoin to all-time highs for sure. If the government starts buying Bitcoin.
Fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Elon Musk called the election early too. He put out a tweet that said "game, set, match." He said that if part of that rhetoric he was putting out there was saying that he's probably going to jail if Donald Trump doesn't win. But I did listen to Rachel Maddow say that if Kamala Harris wins, that they need to take all the companies away from Elon Musk and put him in jail. So he probably he did go all in. Like they say in Texas Hold'em, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was just that in itself, his involvement seemed to suggest a Trump victory to me, because Elon Musk is one of those people that is just like a natural winner, isn't it? It seems like everything he touches, it turns to gold. And I think a lot of people kind of looked at that moment as that's when a lot of the momentum began to enter into the Trump campaign.
And he was a Democrat, and he would. I think it goes way back to when the Biden-Harris government held that EV summit in Washington, and invited everybody there except Tesla, and said that GM was leading the way, and so I don't know. And then just a bunch of things in California that really upset him, and I think one of the big moments for this election for a lot of people was the attempted assassination. And that's when you've seen people like Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, like, he's a tough guy. And I think that's the day after is when Elon Musk endorsed him. And a bunch of people then said, because to them, he was an American hero.
Yeah, well, it's I think it was Mark Zuckerberg that said you can't fake that, can you? It's not possible to pretend that you're brave when you've been shot. That's something that you either have it or you don't.
That's right.
And he showed that he did have it. Yeah, and it is quite impressive, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got I think better people around him this time with Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Elon Musk. There's a Joe Rogan, and there's a whole bunch of people. There's a long list of people that are kind of like joined him there, Vivek, and all these people. But left-wing extremists wasted no time to vandalize the U.S. Embassy in protest of Trump's fascism.
I wrote that in 5 things, and it's a real blast from the past, isn't it? It's an indication probably of where we're going. We're going back there, aren't we? Because it seemed to me during the Trump presidency, this kind of thing was just like a daily occurrence, wasn't it? Some kind of protest from some obscure extremist group. I mean, just Stop Oil maybe aren't so obscure. I think a lot of people are aware of them because they've destroyed a lot of famous artworks, and they've stopped traffic. They have some quite sort of eye-catching techniques, don't they?
Maybe when Stephen Jabot is no longer in government, he'll be joining them.
Yeah, get arrested again, maybe.
That was a joke. Polyev asked Trudeau to take ownership of the divisions, what we're seeing in these temple clashes. So I think a lot of people in Canada are hoping for that spring election too. Even more so now with the Donald Trump victory.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder what influence that will have, because like you mentioned that poll, didn't you? It was actually Angus Reid. I think I said it was Nanos incorrectly yesterday. But the Angus Reid poll, I think that's accurate. That's my instinct as well, that Canadians would rather have a sort of conservative with a conservative and to align with the US. Okay. So I do wonder if that will have an effect on the polls, but I'm not sure that the gap can get any wider, really. It's pretty huge right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if Kamala Harris had won, I think Trudeau would have been a better, like they would have been more matched, and Polyev and Trump. I mean, they tried to put a lot of Trump on top of Polyev, so there they go. They got their wish, right?
No, it probably. I mean, we assume that anyway, that it would have been better, that Trudeau and Kamala, because they both have a Montreal connection, don't they? And they're both progressives, but. I don't know. I mean, there was a lot of excitement when Biden won, but I'm not sure Biden's been particularly good for Canada, has he? I mean,
well, the Keystone Pipeline right away, right out of the gate, the Keystone Pipeline. There's a bunch of stuff that was well on its way because Trump promised to build that. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually comes back into play.
Yeah, and it'll also be interesting to see what happens with lumber tariffs as well. That was not so long ago that they were put. They were increased, weren't they? Almost doubled. Yeah. There are a lot of outstanding questions, but the thing to bear in mind was Biden was a pretty protectionist president too, and if Renee Merrifield was right, which she said to you the other day, she thought that it didn't really matter who was elected in America, that both of them were going to be protectionist.
So we'll have to take a wait and see approach to that. Moving on into our AI EV kind of segment, there was just a thing came out and says, here's what the cost of the average vehicle, not the average vehicle, but what vehicles cost over 1 to 5 years. And Tesla came out at the cheapest cost in 1 to 5 years. The top of that list there, I think it was $580 over 5 years. And you can find that list there. You can go through it. I think Land Rover was at the bottom of the pile and expensive. Obviously, some of the more expensive cars are more expensive to own and operate.
I'm just looking at that list now, and all the Europeans really look like that they're at the bottom there, including Volvo. You wouldn't expect Volvo to be right down there.
Well, I mean, if you can go get an oil change on some of those vehicles, I remember even with, we had a BMW diesel. It's so expensive for an oil change. Like I think the first 4 years you get it in the price of the car, but after that, I think $800 or something like that. It's kind of very expensive to own and operate, right? When you're doing oil changes a couple times a year.
But I guess a lot of people thought it was worth it to have such a nice car, a luxury car.
Well, there you go. And then Dan Ives, one of the analysts covering Tesla, said that this win by Trump could add, and we're going to play a little clip here, play it about to the 60-second mark there. We're just waiting here for, there you go. I think you're going to play it.
Trump, he looks to have a commanding lead in Electoral College. It would actually be good for Tesla, even though it would generally be bad for EVs because of credits would be taken away and other factors that would be headwinds for the industry. Why is it good for Tesla?
It's a dream scenario for any Tesla bull. I mean, I think this could ultimately add $40 to $50 per share to Tesla stock right off the bat. And we could now be talking about $1.5 trillion market cap for Tesla because, first off, from an EV perspective, if Trump gets elected, he'll pull the EV tax credits. But that, from a scale and scope perspective, is a positive for Tesla. And that's huge here. And I think the other thing is if Trump gets in, he will fast-track autonomous FSD. Cybercab could get pulled forward about a year. This is really, for a Tesla bull, if you wake up to this, it's exactly what you want to see. And, of course, Musk.
There you go. Dan is very positive on Tesla if Trump. Obviously, Trump has won, and Tesla is up $33 already this morning on that news. So,
I wonder how favorable the rest of the Republican Party is towards Tesla, though, because for a long time they've made electric cars a kind of punch bag, haven't they?
Yeah. I think the Green New Deal will probably get scrapped. All the EV credits will get scrapped, but that will be to the benefit of Tesla. And they've promised him a role in the government, the Department of Government Efficiency, where Elon says he can slash $2 trillion, similar to what he did at X. I'm sure a lot of people working in the government right now are just like, because one of the things he did when he went to Twitter, he said, bring me the code you've been working on for the past 2 months, and we got nothing to bring me, don't even bother coming. So he may do the same thing with government, says, show me what you've done for the past whatever. And if you don't have anything to show, then you know where you're going.
His companies are also locked in litigation with the US government on a number of things, aren't they? I know SpaceX is for something to do with refusing to employ asylum seekers or something like that. So I imagine he's hopeful that will be dismissed.
Well, that one's kind of a ridiculous one because all the people hired for SpaceX actually get vetted by the government. You can't hire asylum seekers because it's a military contractor and all the hiring has to be done through the US government.
Yeah, well, the U.S. Justice Department seemed to think they had a case, didn't they?
Well, crazier things going on. And then as we move on into the markets again, and we talked about this already, Bitcoin, huge spike there. And you can see that spike there. And you can just track that back to when the markets were, you could see it as you were watching it as well. You could see it as, like they were calling elections. And the electoral votes started piling up there, and I can't remember when that was, but it was fairly early on when Bitcoin and the betting markets reacted very strongly. Well, I think when Pennsylvania started to look like it was going towards Trump, and I think that for sure. I mean, everybody seemed to key on Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but he also North Carolina, I think, that started to lean towards Trump pretty early on, and that was when. Because I was following the New York Times, they have that little dial thing, don't they, where they're like the likelihood. They'd started to put that at like 60-70% Trump. Yeah. Very, very early in the night.
Yeah, they definitely, like with the betting markets, that I was watching that as well. So that indicator was definitely. And one of the things I was watching, I think MSNBC, they were saying like the pollsters got it wrong, like that they're off by 3 to 4 points. And I think that goes back to when we talked to Mario Canseco. There's a lot of closet voters for Trump that would not say how they voted until.
It does overall, I mean, it seems like when you look at the aggregator, like Real Clear Polling or whatever it is, they seem to just about get it right. Maybe the margin not quite right. It seems to be more in Trump's favor than they expected. But there's some really big names that got it wrong. Like Ann Seltzer, she's the one that predicted that Iowa was going to go to Kamala.
Yeah, you
by
said
3 or
that,
4 points.
You said that yesterday that she'd predict a Harris win.
Yeah, well, it implied if Harris was going to win Iowa, that implied basically a landslide for Harris. So, but she only did that one state. But I mean, that's a bit of humble pie for her. And then there's also a very famous historian, Alan Lichtman, I think his name is, who predicted and has predicted most of the elections accurately. He predicted a Harris win too, and obviously he got it wrong.
So, I mean, we're talking a lot about this election because it matters to the world. Like, it's just, it's not like, like we're talking about a regional election or something. This is an international election in so many ways, rather than just an American election, right? Because the Americans have, again, the strongest economy, the strongest military, and they have the USD. I mean, they have a lot of power, right? And a lot of countries depend on the Americans. And now you have a government that is very much pro-American again, and he's going to put America first. And it's probably going to be to the detriment of a lot of other countries.
Yeah, but I would say Joe Biden also claimed to be putting America first. And I think his policies actually were, at least on the economic side, they were pretty sort of America first, weren't they? Yeah. With the Inflation Reduction Act. But I mean, it is true with America. We kind of, it seems like we obsess over it. And I know a lot of people get sick of that, don't they, when they're not in America. But the reality is they are so powerful and so influential. And it's not just the military. The military is stronger than, I think it's something like the next 10 or 20 militaries combined. Yeah. But if you look at the rest of it, if you look in terms of their ability to raise capital, even their stock markets, their companies, obviously the US dollar, their gold that they have in Fort Knox there, everything, it's the same again and again and again. They are so powerful that it really does, it's gonna affect your life, really, no matter where you are.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that didn't work out for Joe Biden was that withdrawal from Afghanistan embarrassed sorry, I dropped my poppy. Embarrassed the U.S. military, and I think that in itself turned off a lot of Americans.
Yeah, and also the sort of the support of Ukraine that's popular with a lot of people, but it's also not popular with a lot of people, isn't it? Yeah. I think, and that was something that just dragged on and on and on. And I think maybe that his enthusiasm for supporting Ukraine maybe upset quite a lot of people as well.
And then we look at gold this morning, off quite a bit. And always that's to be understood with the US dollar gaining strength. And that's usually a reflection of that. So it likely will start to recover a little bit as the day moves on because it has that initial drop. And then it might recover that a little bit. The Canadian dollar weaker, of course, as well. So, and the Canadian dollar does not look great at this point. It looks like it wants to break down even further, right? So, it's at 71.81, the Canadian dollar. And then if we look at the stock market in general, huge lift in the markets, right? So obviously the stock markets were cheering for a Donald Trump victory because he's talking tax cuts, he's talking stimulus, he's talking a whole bunch of things, right? That he bringing back jobs to the United States, all these things, everything that he talks about along with Elon Musk is very positive for the U.S. Manufacturing complex and all that kind of stuff. So very positive for the stock market and for technology as well.
Yeah, and the Elon factor must be relevant there too, I would imagine.
If he can keep that big tent together that he's put together with, like the likes of RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, she's very well spoken. And, if she can stay in there, Vivek and all those people that are more kind of, I guess, business sense, but plus have like Tulsi's very, I think more of a centrist kind of thing. And, I think, some good things might come out of America, including with Elon Musk. I mean, if you look at how all his companies are top companies. When you get people like Rachel Maddow saying going to take all that away from him, and he's done so much for the the United States, like, I mean, SpaceX is not just a spacefaring company. It's the largest military contractor too. But that's not used for actually military purposes yet, and hopefully it won't be. But I mean, he has plans to go to Mars. So, and I think Donald Trump is really going to be supportive of that Mars thing, and that's supposedly the unmanned mission goes in 18 months.
Yeah. Well, it's crucial, isn't it, with space to cooperate with the US government, isn't it? I mean, they need permission to even launch, don't they? Every time they launch, they need to get permission. And then obviously NASA hands out a lot of contracts. And I think that's kind of a lot of SpaceX's income is relying on those contracts.
Sure. So it'll be interesting to see these things as they play out over the next few days and until they hand over power on January 6th. I know that Al Sharpton was saying they're not going to have their own January 6th event, that they're going to hand over power graciously. So we'll see how this all plays out.
Yeah. And let's just hope that Elon Musk remembers his early days in Ontario and Saskatchewan, and he chucks us a few crumbs.
Like, he thought that it was worthwhile risking it all to save democracy in the United States. Maybe he'll get motivated and save democracy in Canada.
Or at least the economy. Let's start with the economy.
Yeah, let's start with the economy. There you go. Let's start there. And then just a closing note here on the Toronto home sales market. You live near Toronto. We did see a sales jump in October after the Bank of Canada rate cuts. So home sales are up 44%.
Very hot market, usually.
And the prices were up like 1.1%. So maybe some stabilization in the markets and stuff like that too. So we'll see how that plays out. We are expecting another rate cut here before the end of the year.
Yeah, and it might be a big one.
Yeah. So I think that Donald Trump is going to push for rates to come down as well, even though people think that they might go the other way. But I think he's always been a big proponent of lower rates, and I think the way he ran the government was to incentivize with tax cuts and everything. So a different way than a punishing way. So we'll see how that all plays out. And obviously, if he's going to be generous with incentives and tax cuts on the south side of the border, Canada's going to have to compete to keep its people here too.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? Though, a point to raise is I don't think that we really matched Biden with the Inflation Reduction Act, did we? I know that the EU did a kind of an attempt at that, which is basically just a massive program of subsidies, isn't it, for your own businesses? I
think we did something there. They were talking about. They just don't know where the money went.
Yeah, well, there's the Green Fund, but I mean that was
they're just not sure.
In comparison to the Inflation Reduction Act, that was just
not
nothing,
sure.
Was it? It was pennies.
They're just not sure who has it.
Yeah, that's an ongoing conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, sadly that is. And anything else you want to? We got the auction. We can chat about the auction. Go on KelownaNow.com. There's a button on the top there, auction. It's a great way to support local businesses. And maybe we'll start featuring some of those businesses as we move along here. But we've been at this for a while now. So anything else you want to add before we close it off for today, Iain?
Nothing in particular. Just we'll all have our eyes on Trump, really, won't we? That is the next 5 years at least.
Yeah, I think. The interesting things over the next 24 hours though is Joe Biden. And then Kamala Harris, when they take to the microphone, it'll be interesting to see what they have to say. And then obviously Trump's going to have some stuff to say, and J.D. Vance and all that stuff too, right?
And Barack Obama, who really went all in. Be good to see what he has to say.
It would be. There you go. And we thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local.